Hello, and welcome to Somos Hispanos. I am your host, Cristiana Malacara. Today, we are going to explore the world of financial literacy, as there has been a proven gap in financial literacy in the Latino community. We'll be talking with two financial advisors to learn more. Welcome, guys. Thank you for sharing your expertise to the community of Somos Hispanos and really just honing in on something that we saw has a gap. There's a financial literacy gap, period, but especially in the Latino community. When we're talking about financial literacy, why not bring in two financial advisors? So thank you for being here, Hector and Amadeo. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Of course. I first wanted to say financial literacy, financial advisor. Some of those words may be foreign to us. Some of those words we never grew up with. What does a financial advisor do?
Great question. And I think there's a lot behind that question that a lot of people don't understand, specifically Hispanics. So Christiana, I would say to the average person who's not aware of what a financial advisor does, we basically project and forecast and make sure that those that want to understand the math and how to prepare for retirement or a situation in life, that they will be able to prepare for it properly. So we make sure the math works and that they're ready to start a plan.
Do you have a similar definition, Amadeo, of financial advisement and essentially literacy of finances?
Yeah, absolutely. I think echoing Hector a little bit, the idea of being a financial advisor, ultimately our goal is to help families reach their long-term financial planning goals, whether it's saving for retirement, saving for big ticket purchase items along the future, essentially helping that person create a roadmap along the way.
A roadmap, that's interesting. I like that idea. When it comes to mapping things out, what inspired you to do what you do? Did we just wake up one day and say, I'm 5 years old and I want to learn about money?
I'll jump in here. Well, I would say there's two sides to finance. There's the defense and offensive side. And when it comes to the defensive side of finance, a lot of people ask for money in forms of loans or credit cards and when they need it. Well, we decided that we wanted to help out individuals, our clients, by preparing on the offensive side. The offensive side is the fun stuff. That's where we help them set up an investment account or prepare with some sort of product to help in a tragic event of some sort. So when it comes down to specific situations in life, because life happens as we know it, what I wanted to do and what we decided to start was a service advisor group that would eventually or essentially help out those to prepare and be their own bank, so to speak, versus having to ask for that help down the road, on their roadmap.
Amadeo, why did you want to be a financial advisor?
Yeah, I think a lot of it really goes back to like my beginning days of growing up, watching my family struggle, watching mom or dad not really have the opportunity to have these conversations. And growing up in the Metro Detroit area, I realized this was actually something pretty common with other families too. And there simply aren't people like us knocking on doors or going out and meeting the faces of these individuals and having these conversations with them. So when I first had the opportunity to hire my financial advisor, we did some really good work together. I appreciated a lot of the values he brought me and some of the things that he opened up to my perspective. And I knew right from there that was something that I wanted to eventually do one day.
Opening doors for others, essentially.
Absolutely.
Being the teacher. Hector, how about you? Why did you want to be a financial advisor?
Well, in our market, the Hispanic community, typically 1 in 4 are lacking in the knowledge. So when it comes to financial literacy, we were to ask them 5 basic questions. Typically 25% of those are going to be able to answer them. Out of that 25%, even less actually have a plan, closer to about 12 or 13%. So when it comes down to impacting the area, the community, the people, I wanted to make sure that we get a message across that this isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario or plan. This is something that everyone can do. And if everyone can at least take one small step towards it, whether it's a monthly basis or going to be on a long-term path, like we said, that roadmap is really important because consistency is what's going to make it happen for them. Let's go ahead and teach them a little bit of knowledge. They can be consistent and then build their budget from there. I wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity for those downfalls.
So let's talk a little bit more about the plan, the roadmap. We get things done in a list, right? Sometimes directionally, sometimes a little more organically, but it goes down to show that you don't know what you don't know. So for our viewers out there who are tuning in and just like, okay, this is why these guys are financial advisors. Why should I incorporate this into my lifestyle? Why should I have a financial advisor? What is one tip that you would just hone in on to share with them to start that plan?
I think one of the biggest tips that could resonate is, when we meet with professionals along the way, one thing that we hear often is, I'm not sure if I make enough money to meet with a financial advisor or planner yet, or, I'm not sure if I'm in the capacity to be able to, start putting myself on a consistent saving goal. And a lot of, really at the end of the day, some of the best people who create successful, wealth strategies aren't the individuals who are, knocking the cover off the ball. They're really individuals who are consistent within their saving, putting an extra $200, $300, $400 a month away into their budget, but doing it on a consistent basis.
Let's dive into that just a little bit. Is there a minimum amount that someone should have to obtain a financial advisor?
Not necessarily. Hector and I, we pride ourselves on, meeting individuals where they're at, whether they're, making $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year. Each plan we individualize is going to be tailored to the individual's needs. The cool part about it is, although they may not be in a position where they're saving the most, eventually we'll be able to help them and give them the guidance to get them there one day.
Hector, what should be the first step when someone's seeking out a financial advisor?
Ask questions. Find out what it is that your goal is going to be, what you want your goal to be. Is it to retire early, retire later, to make sure you have a certain amount of income in retirement? Is there a specific maybe vacation you want to hit along the way? You don't need to be, let's just say, retirement rich and live poorly. There's a healthy balance in between. Just like a work-life balance, there is a budgeting balance that you can prepare for. And just to piggyback off of what Amadeo said is, absolutely we meet people where they're currently at because that's part of the plan. We don't want them to feel strained due to their planning. We want them to feel like they are a little bit more empowered, to feel like they're doing the right thing, they're making headway, and they're not going to fall behind. So when we do talk to people and we make sure that they have that plan set on paper and map it out, we come back with a pretty good portfolio for them to understand it in the best abilities that they have. But I would say, just to add on to it, is if there's a question that they should ask directly, it's probably going to be, if something were to happen to me, who's going to help me take care of this? And that's how you find out if the person you're talking to truly has it in their heart to actually help you, or is this just another client? What we do is called integrated planning, and integrated planning is a little bit more expansive. And if that person truly has their best interest, their best benefit, their goal in mind, they'll help them integrate whatever that plan along the way is into their long-term financial plan.
Long-term financial plan, essentially, what I'm hearing is starts with a long-term relationship
Absolutely.
with the client and bringing the financial literacy bar to where they are. Like you said, we're meeting them where they're at. Mm-hmm. So let's unpack this a little further. We're creating a plan. And what would be maybe 2 or 3 of the you must know this to move forward services that you would recommend?
I'll jump right into this one. So I would say 2 or 3 services to jump right into. Number one is going to be, what's your savings model? We can help you develop the savings model and help you create the product of where to put it.
What's a savings model?
Savings model is going to be, it's going to be a portion of your income, whether before or after tax, that you are putting away percentage-wise. A lot of people tend to follow like the 60, 20-20 rule or the 50-30-20 rule, where regardless of what model you follow, that 20% goes towards savings. And if they can't put the 20% towards savings, because life is different for everybody, that's fine, as long as you consistently follow a portion of that to into some sort of an account. So the product that would follow that is going to be your typical savings money market account, maybe a permanent life insurance account, a Roth or investment account of some sort. And it has to make sense for that person and their goal.
Do you see that the Latino and Hispanic population are doing this?
Absolutely not to the scale that they should.
Why? Why do you say that?
There's about 26% that are ready for an emergency in the home, and that's prepared with about $2,000 or less. There are 13% that actually know they should prepare but are not ready for it. So if you have a furnace go out, or you have a water heater, or you have a situation outside of the home where you need to come up with some quick cash, the other roughly 87% just simply are not going to have it, and that's for a small emergency of estimated 20 grand, 2,000 or less. So,
Amadeo, you started out by saying you became a financial advisor because you saw the lack of knowledge in your own home. Can you empathize with what Hector's explaining that is still happening today?
Yeah, I think a lot of the common scenarios I'm running into just working throughout my Latino community right here in the Metro Detroit area is we make recommendations to families on what they should be doing, aligning with their goals, but a lot of it comes with a trust factor of things saying like we don't really know somebody who does this, or is this truly going to be effective long term? And nothing is necessarily guaranteed, but they gotta understand the knowledge basis of historically over time, here's what happened in the past. Now this may not happen within the future, but saving something versus nothing is always going to be more effective at the end of the day.
I like that piece of advice. That seems like a good one to follow. So besides what Hector had mentioned as far as a service that you would just top-notch recommend, what is something that you would recommend to someone who's just moving into the financial advisement world?
I think the first value add you could bring in is helping someone understand a budget plan. Helping them walk through and understand exactly what their means are, what they're able to save, if they're spending too much on their daily lifestyle, or playing a simple game of keeping up with the Joneses. I think it's important to also realize within the budget strategy, it also creates ideas for what does debt optimization look like? How could we effectively work good debt versus bad debt, essentially? Good debt meaning like low interest rates, things we can afford, things that are going to help boost our credit. But then bad debt like high interest credit card rates, or unfavorable car loans that are in the higher teens. Being able to help someone walk through that and understand like opportunities to refinance with some of the local banks, or putting them in a position where they can ultimately save more money to start paying themselves a little bit more.
I like that idea. This is news to me essentially too. I don't think that there is a cap on too much about finances. It feels like this world of financial literacy is evolving, changing and growing. When we narrow this down to the Hispanic Latino population, I should mention that Amadeo is representing the Metro Detroit area and Hector is representing the Great Lakes Bay region area. Within those two areas, do you see that the Hispanic Latino population has any differences or similarities when it comes to financial literacy in making this map?
Statistically, no, but there are differences on the surrounding area that they work with. So obviously in the Great Lakes Bay region, we're going to have a smaller demographic population in the Hispanic market compared to Metro Detroit. However, the percentages, they are across the board right on target. I can say through experience that 25% of people that do understand the financial literacy questions and how to roadmap their budget, it's extremely accurate. There's no question about it. So how do we get in front of the other 75%? And I think that's with exposure. It's talking about it, and it's just basically asking questions. Find somebody you trust in the community and get started with, who do you work with? Who do you know? And how can I get to where you're at?
How do you feel about that?
I think the biggest commonality I see between both communities, culture is a little bit different, but the big similarity also comes back to this basic idea of trust. Like both communities essentially want to work with people they like and trust at the end of the day, and if you can help them take this complex situation and simplify it for them based on a plan that they could understand, essentially that's how we can be the most effective.
So let's talk a little bit about the end game to this roadmap. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are thinking, what about retirement? Because I'm just about done. And that might be on their personal roadmap or their mental capacity. But when we're looking at retirement in the specifics of Latino Hispanic population across the state, are we making these plans? Are we preparing? And if so, or if not, what can we do?
I'd say absolutely. Looking at Mount Everest, for example, climbing up the mountain is definitely very hard, but arguably it's just as difficult, if not harder, to actually make it back down to the mountain. And a lot of it goes with planning for retirement. We go on this wealth accumulation journey, and we've done really well for ourselves. And at this point, we're at the top of the mountain. Who do we work with, or how can we trust someone to work to unpack these assets and help us be able to spend these down and not have to worry about, are we going to run out of money, at some point in our 80s or 90s, or are we going to be frugal on how we spend and essentially cheat ourselves out of our retirement years and not spend enough? Working with a financial planner or an advisor really helps create a plan that is that roadmap for unpacking the assets, but doing it in a way to where we could be tax savvy or strategic.
So let's even go further down this roadmap, end of life, which is something that the Latino culture honestly celebrates. But once we're there and the family is gathered, there's always this cloud of, now what? What do we do with the finances that are left behind? If that is, I guess you can answer this better than me, but if at the end of life there's debt, if we're in the red or we here in the green, what is something that you would advise to that family before we get there?
I think that goes into the legacy planning side, and I would say, how do we prepare for it? Sometimes it's just simply having a conversation with your family members, whether it's the grandma, the grandpa, or the grandkids, great grandkids. It's finding out, do we want to leave something behind? Are we going to leave the house to somebody? Are we going to have a will? Are we going to have something in writing, just ready for them to take all of our belongings and share it so that our memory lives on? The Hispanic community is really big about leaving a legacy and having those memories passed on. So how do we impact the next generation as best as possible, we help them have a plan so that they're not burdened by taxes or burdened by a lack of planning, such as preparation for death benefits. And what we would say as part of the end game is that end game is different for everybody. If it's not a one size fits all. Some people have an end game of just retiring, and some people have an end game of making sure that their grandkids are taken care of.
Can you add to that in any way?
I believe it's important to address the underlying factor that everyone's going to pass away at some point. It's something that's a given. And going back to the idea of, the first question we ask all of our clients when we first meet them is, what's important for us to cover for you? Whether it's, making sure if you pass away at the end of the day that, little Susie or little Jimmy make it to college or have that college taken care of for them, or leaving a legacy to the family, or if we put ourselves in a situation where we do have a lot of debt, how do we create a plan to where if we were to pass away tomorrow, all this debt is taken care of? And essentially working with a client to help them understand that and helping them find the right types and amount of life insurance is going to be important.
So I'm going to ask it again. Is the Latino and the Hispanic population doing this? Are we making this happen?
On a very small scale, very small percentages, we can do better. I think that's where it starts, is find somebody you trust. I like to ask, are you open-minded to every client? Because I think that'll tell me whether you are willing to not only listen to the advice, but actually implement it. And implementing is going to be a big piece of how we can help out best. The knowledge is free. The education is free. It's out there. Talk to somebody. Can we do better and increase those percentages? Absolutely.
So we're talking about closing this gap. There's a generational gap that has been happening for over 100 years. The lack of financial literacy and planning and creating the roadmap. But we're tossing around this word a lot, trust. How is it that each of you establish trust with the Latino population?
Trust simply comes from going to meet the family in person, helping them create this financial plan at the dinner table, not necessarily taking care of things or asking them questions over a phone call, or not having the integrity to actually go meet them and help them understand where are these questions coming from, or how can we better help understand your situation, essentially. And simply at the end of the day, we work with who we like and trust, and the better you build a relationship with families in the community, the more likely they are to refer you to their family. And family is something we really pride, that's important to us, just given the business that we're in. So I believe it's definitely important, as families do trust us, to help us introduce us to more of their families.
Wonderful. Do you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I build it on 3 morals. Trust is the big one, and then it's honesty and respect. Integrity is built in automatically because we are fiduciary to what we do, and whether the best interest of our clients is with us or somewhere else or with another idea, we're going to let them know that right up front. And we're also going to let them know that we're here as a resource and a long-term value financial planner for them. So when we start a meeting, we ask them, we have sort of 3 rules. Let me know what you're thinking. Please be honest, don't hold back. Let's share networks, because the people you care about, we want to help care about them with you. And then 3, if there's anything that you have a question about, please interrupt us, because I want you to get your answer, and let's not jump over it. Let's make sure that we understand each other in full.
Wonderful. So now that myself and all of our listeners are just fueled up and want to get started, what would you recommend as the very first step?
Let's find out what's important to you. Talk about it with your spouse, your mother, your father, parents, your kids, really any stage of life. And let's see if we can help you. You can Google it. You could ask a friend, ask a teacher, ask a mentor, ask your clergy. somebody knows somebody that is willing to help you. You just have to find out and ask questions. Be open-minded. Have that scope just lens wide open. Don't shy away from it. Don't be scared. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of people pride themselves on, I know what's best for me. In reality, there's too much information out there for a single person to know how to get started or save in the long term. So yes, just have an open mind and make sure to ask about it.
Amadeo, what is one piece of advice that you would pass along to someone who is going to check out the website or give a call? What would you tell them to ask you?
I think the most important part in the beginning stages is, one, setting up that conversation to be had. I think it's important to find someone you like and work with, but have that initial conversation of, here's what's important to me. Here's what I want to be able to accomplish over the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever the timeline is. And then essentially, nailing down the budget sheet. I think the budget sheet is one of the biggest backbones of a financial plan, because it helps an individual like myself understand, where we're meeting this person at in their life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for coming on to Somos Hispanos and sharing your expertise as financial advisors. Hector, representing the Great Lakes Bay region, and Amadeo, representing the Metro Detroit area. I appreciate you guys coming on, and I can't wait to learn more.
We appreciate you having us. Thank you again.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Somos Hispanos on Delta College Public Media. To learn more about establishing a firm financial plan, gaining economic mobility, and closing the financial literacy gap in the Latino population, visit the website or call the number below. I'm your host, Cristiana Malagata. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Somos Hispanos.
Escape into the stories you love with Delta Passport. Stream thousands of hours of your favorite programs. From the new PBS masterpiece drama, The Forsytes, to season 15 of Call the Midwife. And don't miss Antiques Roadshow, now featuring their visit to Castle Farms in Charlevoix. Only $8 a month. Watch what you want, whenever you want. Unlock Delta Passport today.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.